Welcome back, everyone. I am back from the Indianapolis Vault Tour this last weekend, and I had a great time. I met some awesome people, including Jean-Claude Van Keyforge, so shout-outs to him. It was great to meet him and a lot of the community. Great community. I highly recommend going to a Vault Tour if you have a chance. But because I got back, I have the deck that I played in the Vault Tour. Full disclosure, I didn't do great. I mean, I won my first 2 games, I was strong, and then my last 4 didn't go quite well. But I thought it might be interesting just to go through this deck and kind of show why I thought it was special, what's really good about it, and what kind of fell short while I was in my game. So I'll be doing kind of a similar thing to what I do when I normally look at a deck, when I open a brand new deck. But there'll be more detail here. So in case you're maybe a new player and you're just getting into Keyforge and you kind of want to know what I look for, being a person who's been playing this game since it came out, then yeah, this will be kind of a nice tutorial video for those kinds of people. So yeah, so my deck that I was playing was called Noab Niflhammer, the Dismal Archer, and it had Starlines, Shadows, and Untamed. I separated all 3 of the houses into separate stacks. And I'll go through each house individually and kind of talk about them. So let's just start with Shadows here first. So in Shadows we had 2 of the Umbras. It's the 2-power creatures with Skirmish, and when it fights, it steals 1. So these are good creatures. They typically don't stick around too terribly long, but when they do, they usually steal at least 1 or 2 amber. You can reliably get 1 or 2 amber if they can survive at least 1 turn. So that's pretty good. And then Ronnie Wristclocks is always good to see. He instantly steals 1. So you can already see we have a lot of steal potential. Breaker Hill gives 2 of its neighbors action steal 1 amber. And, just a spoiler warning, this deck has a lot of creatures. So I did use this a couple times, and it did come in handy. Simon, a great disruption card, as I always say. It is a 1-power creature with Skirmish, and put the creature it fights on top of its owner's deck. I unfortunately didn't get to use this that much. But it usually could be a good disruption card if it lands properly. But you'll see, I'll talk about why I typically didn't use this creature very much. This is a new one I don't think we've seen yet. It's called We Sand, a 1-power creature with Deploy and Elusive. So Deploy means it can go anywhere in the battle line. And it's got Elusive. And if it's on a flank, destroy it. So it can't be anywhere on a flank. You can't let it let one side of its battle line be destroyed too much. Otherwise, it'll just instantly die. But you can play it whenever you want, and after a player forges a key, gain 2. So if your opponent's about to forge and you can't stop them, you play this and you get 2 extra amber. You're about to forge next turn, they can't stop you. You forge and you get 2. So this is a card that's actually gotten me quite a few amber in my games. And then we have the Sneck Lifter, which is great, right? This new set. There are a couple artifacts that are big problem artifacts. So I saw this in my deck, and I thought to myself, yeah, this is great. I can take the best artifact at any time and control it. But it actually didn't come into play that often. I don't know if it was just my luck or if this set, the best artifacts aren't that common. But whenever I did take artifacts, they were kind of inconsequential. But yeah, normally I think this guy's great. Just take a big, usually the personal artifacts that only work for 1 player are really, really good. So it's always good to have that. So that's all the creatures that were in here. So not a bad number of creatures. It was 7. Yeah, it was 7 creatures. So that's over half. Like to see that. And then we got a hit and run, which is great with that Ronnie Wristclocks. You deal 2 damage, and also it's great with that Sneck Lifter. But you deal 2 damage to a creature and return a friendly creature to your hand. So you can play Sneck Lifter, do 2 damage to your opponent's creature, return to your hand, take another artifact. Or with Ronnie, you can return to your hand and get another amber stolen. So this is a great card in this deck. Pestering Blow is just another amber card, does the damage and enrages, so takes care of those small problem creatures. Subtle Maul is always good to get cards out of your opponent's hand. Spike Trap is a good spot removal. I thought it'd be nice to be able to do some extra damage. And this is another new one that I thought was really cool, called Keyforgery. It's an artifact with an amber bonus, and when your opponent would forge a key, that player names a house. Reveal a random card from your hand, and if that card is not the named house, destroy Keyforgery, and they do not forge that key. So this is like Miasma from the first set, but sort of like a passive Miasma that sticks around until it gets used, which is really interesting, So I thought, yeah, that's a good passive way of not just setting it out there. If my opponent forges, that's fine, but it's still there. It's still a thing they have to worry about and kind of maybe play around. a little bit. So yeah, I thought that was really cool. You know, you can set your hand up in a certain way, and they might guess. They have a 33% chance. You know, they can look at your discard pile and what's on the board, so they can make an educated guess. But every time I've had it out, it worked for me at least once. So it was a pretty good card. I really liked that one. So that was my Shadows. I think my Shadows was overall really strong. What really made me want to pick this deck was my Untamed. And you can see right off the bat, we have the Untamed leader. We have Eldest Bear, who is adorable, of course. It's a 5-power creature with Assault 3. And while it's in the center of the battle line, it gets before fight, gain 2 amber. So it seems like a tough thing, actually, to get it in the center. But in one of my games, I actually managed to get this in the center early on, and it got me maybe a total of 8 to 10 amber just by fighting over and over every turn, and my opponent couldn't establish a board, and that's how I won my second game because of Eldest Bear. I didn't pick the Untamed just because of this guy, but he certainly did boost my my opinion of this Untamed. Next, we have 2 of these Ghost Hawks. Ghost Hawk is amazing. It's deploy, so again, you can put it anywhere in your battle line, and you can reap with each neighboring creature one at a time. So basically, whenever I was evaluating this deck, I saw these as 2 amber. I evaluated these as 2 amber. Every time I open a deck, I count up the amber, and I counted these as 2 amber each. So yeah, 4 extra amber, which again we'll talk about later why that might have been a little overzealous of me, but yeah, and then combine that with the Song of the Wild. So for the remainder of the turn, each friendly creature gains reap, gain 1. So you reap with all your Untamed creatures that you have out, which we had. I think we had only. Let's see. We had a few. We had a few in this deck, but yeah, you reap with all your Untamed creatures, and then you put these out next to the non-Untamed creatures, and you get more amber, right? So that's great, and then you can double that amber too with this card. So that right off the bat, that really that stuck out to me, and that made me think that this was a winner of a deck to play. Cauldron Boil, some nice spot damage. Oftentimes I just played this for the amber. More often than not, played this for the amber. But then we have the Key Charge too. So not only do we have 2 of these Phoenixes and the Song of the Wild, we had Key Charge. And I do have to say, with this deck, I did get this Key Charge off almost every single game. I didn't do it as well. I'll talk about that at the end, but yeah, I'll talk about that at the end, why they didn't turn out very well. But to add insult to injury, we have 2 of these imprinted Marmooks, which reduce my key cost. So not only do we have a lot of amber generation with those Phoenixes, Song of the Wild, and then we have a Key Charge, but we have 2 things that reduced our amber cost. So our keys, if we had both these out, cost 4, and then we could pay 5 for a Key Charge. Yeah, I thought that was just a winner. Like, I basically saw this Untamed as like a free key. With, if I get enough Untamed cards out in any given game, it's a free key. Pampaka Anga is just great to keep these Marmooks alive, making them 5 power, and then adding power to my Phoenixes just to make them maybe fight something once they're done being useful. I thought, he's a pretty good addition. Tantadlin, kind of an inconsequential addition. I did have one game where he managed to discard a couple cards from my opponent's archives, which was nice, to disrupt them a little bit, but otherwise he was just kind of an extra filler, kind of reaper creature. Unnatural Selection, unfortunately, because of a card I'll show you later on, this card didn't really come into play very much, and that probably was one of my mistakes, not holding on to this card as long as I should have, because this is a really good board wipe, and unfortunately, in a lot of my games, I did draw this very early on. So I didn't want to hang on to it, so I just played it for the amber. But maybe if I had held on to it for a little longer, it's tough to evaluate that, but holding on for a little longer might have helped me out in the long run for these games. And we have Mab the Mad, which is I think one of the few creatures in this set that have an amber bonus, and you get to shuffle it back into your deck when it reaps, which is pretty cool. You get to cycle it back. It's like a little bit worse than a Dust Pixie from the first set. But it's cyclable, which is really interesting. So if you can cycle it, even 2 times, then I think it's worthwhile. So yeah. Overall, I think the Untamed is the strongest portion of this deck. But we have a third portion, which is the Star Alliance. And that's where things in this deck get quite interesting. So we have the Garcia, which is great Key Disruption, of course, making their keys cost 8 on the Play Fighter Reap. Fantastic. We have the Navigator Ali to kind of see what's coming up. Now, his effect, I really don't think I used it as well as it could be used, because every time that I would use his effect, I would have drawn 3 or more cards anyway. So it's not like it would affect anything. But if you were in a bind and you were on a Star Alliance turn, or maybe a turn where you can use an off-house and you couldn't play that many creature cards from your hands, then maybe he would be very useful to kind of make sure that the few draws you do get are the most valuable draws. And we have, I think, 2 of Comm Officer Kirby, which is just great to play off-house stuff. Since the deck had a lot of creatures, I didn't really find that I was in a place. I found a few times that I was in a place to use this effect, but oftentimes I'd play him and I'd be stuck with a handful of creatures instead of any of the artifacts, upgrades, or action cards. So that was unfortunate. I think that was a little bit of bad luck on my end, but these things happen. And then, so we only had 4 creatures in the Star Alliance, so it's our lightest creature house, but that's okay. And then we have a couple of, quite a few, of course, Star Alliance upgrades. Kirby's Blaster is something I actually got off a couple times onto Kirby to let me draw a couple cards. I love that. Those extra draws are really good. Protecting creatures was awesome, especially for those Shadows guys, like this guy. I think I protected him, and I protected Snecklifter a couple times and returned him in my hand and stole another artifact, which is really cool. So, yeah, that was really handy. Using off-house stuff, I did use that quite a bit, and that helped. Light of the Archons is just always good. You can put it on whatever creature you want to protect at the time, and it's fantastic. So, pretty good upgrades. And then Xeno Training. This card almost saved one of my games. I just didn't have enough creatures out. If I'd been able to play one more creature, then I could have captured the Amber I needed to stay in the game. But I couldn't play another creature because of a card that's coming up later, and I'll explain that. And we had Stealth Mode. We had actually 2 Stealth Modes, which, my gosh, kind of pushed this deck over the top for me, because this card is amazing for a common. You get an Amber and your opponent can't play actions during their next turn. That's nuts. And the card that was the most questionable card in this deck for me, Quixelstone. It's an artifact with an Amber upgrade. And if a player has more creatures in play than their opponent, they cannot play creatures. This card was really... I thought it was super good, but I think I ended up using it to burn myself more than help myself. Because there was one game where I was in a situation where I had played this card super early, and to be clear, the first 2 games I won because of this card. The first game, my opponent was playing Brobnar, and I had this card out when he had about 5 creatures, and I had 4, and I played this card and a Stealth Mode in the same turn. So he couldn't play any creatures or action cards because of both of these, which locked him out for, I think, a good 2 or 3 turns and allowed me to kind of catch up with my hand and my board state. I didn't need creatures because this deck has, I think, a good number of just natural Amber on cards. And that just kind of gave me the momentum to win that first game. And the second game, I think, had a similar situation. But the other games, it kind of hurt me because, like I said, so in one of the games, I got it super early, like maybe my second or third turn. And I hadn't really established a board state at that point. And my opponent didn't have a super heavy creature deck. So I was in a situation where I had a board of 2 or 3 creatures, and then a handful of creatures, including, I think, 1 or 2 of these Ghost Hawks, which I counted as Amber, but they're not Amber if I can't play them or if I have no creatures on the board. So that was one of my mistakes. I think playing this card too early is bad. If I draw it too early, I think I would rather discard it, because since this deck has a lot of creatures, it relies on having a lot of creatures out. So that was my mistake. Just playing that out and not really thinking about it. So that's what I would do differently with that card. So that was one of the things. And just generally a lot of these games, though, that I lost, I don't want to give the impression that they were a runaway victory, because they were very close. I think 2 or 3 of them, 3 of them actually, were within maybe a turn later. I would have either drawn a key charge and won, or gotten enough Amber and won. So it's very difficult to say how much of it was my skill or lack of skill, I guess, and how much of it was luck. But I just wanted to kind of, let's go through this, and I'll show you what my thought process was, because I was given 3 decks at this Vault Tour, and given 20 minutes to evaluate them. And I just want you to kind of, if you want to go to a Vault Tour and you're kind of intimidated about going to a big event like that, I want to kind of ease your mind, because, you know, the community in Keyforge, for one thing, is just fantastic. Everybody's been super nice, and you know, it's just a fun event to go out and kind of have fun with people who are like-minded. So don't worry about that too much. But if you want to have like a better idea of what to look for in a deck, this is what you do. So as normal in most of my videos, I look for amber. So let's look for amber. Excuse me. So we have 1, 2, 3, 10, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 is what I counted. I counted 19 amber. Now, compared to the decks I opened on the channel, this was quite a lot. But generally in the game, a good amber count is 17. So this had more than that, which yelled out to me when I was looking at this that it's an Amber Rush deck, which I like. I like playing Amber Rush decks, especially Amber Rush decks with Key Charge. Those are some of my favorite. So I like that a lot. After I look at Amber, I have a look at the creatures. So let's have a look at the creatures. You can already tell there's quite a lot, right? 1, 5, 10, 15, 19 creatures. Did I miss any? So 19 creatures is pretty good. So usually you get about 15 to 16 creatures in a deck. So above average amber generation and above average creatures. Those two things really spoke to me. So, and then on top of that, we have a lot of things. We have 2 of these that can play off-house, and the upgrade that lets us play off-house. And then we had some artifact control with Snecklifter, really good artifact control, which I liked. And then a lot of small ways of making amber. So altogether, I looked at this and I was like, my gosh, this seems like a really good deck. But as with all things card games, it really comes down to the draws and how you play your tools. So I think I did forge up to 2 keys in every single match. It just came down to the wire, and I could not quite compete, especially with the Saurians and their capture. I think of the card Tribute in particular just lets you capture so much amber that this deck could not keep up with that. So yeah, I look at the amber, I look at the creatures, and then I kind of look at for those kind of standout combos and synergies. So I look for, say, for example, okay, I have a way of making a key off house, right? So those effects that really stand out toward my goal. My goal is to make keys. It's Keyforge, right? So my goal is to make keys. Just a second here. So the goal is to make keys in Keyforge, as I've said a couple times now. And to that end, you want to find ways of doing that easy, right? So there's I think a key cheating card in every single house at this point. But I saw this key charge, and I think to myself, how can I play this card as often as possible? How can I play this card as often as possible? Right? So I look at the Star Alliance, and it does have a lot of amber in it, right? It has all these upgrades back here, all these upgrades, and cards in general that have a lot of amber. And then I have these cards that let me play an action off of house. So that's some synergy right there, right? Even if I have the key charge in hand and I call a Star Alliance turn, I can still play the key charge if I had 7 or more amber and forge a key. So that makes the key charge easier to use in general, right? And then the possibilities with Necklifter, taking my opponent's artifact, could make some cool combos happen too. So, and then just the amber generation inside of Shadows that I had was pretty darn good. Just like the guaranteed amber I would get from Weesand, which I got quite a bit of. And then the Mumooks would stick around quite a long time, like I said. This would pump up the Mumooks. So I apologize for my throat. I recovering from a little illness here. But yeah, so those are the things in general that I look for. So looking for other synergies here. Let's see. So I would oftentimes, I did once, I think, use this to lower my opponent's creatures below the amount that would kind of hinder them with Quixelstone. Because this is like a semi-board wipe if my opponent has damaged creatures. That was one thing that I did that I found useful. But yeah, so I would see this deck. I would see the large number of amber, the large number of creatures in this deck, and the general synergy involved in the Untamed and the Star Alliance houses. And together, that's why I thought I'd choose this deck. But you know, it's you have the tools, and I think this deck is really good still. It's just, it was a new set. I wasn't sure exactly how to play the cards, and you know, luck of the draw, I think, had a factor to do with it. But yeah, once again, I had a great time at the Vault Tour. But yeah, so if you know, those simple steps, like I said, let me go through them again. Look at your amber, look at your creatures, and then look for any standout cards that have like a slightly more complicated effect or kind of a broader effect, you know? Something that affects the board in a big way. There's a lot of those cards in the game now, and they're usually rares, but sometimes they can be commons, like Key Charge. Forging a key for that cheap is really, really good. And every house has a key cheat card, like I said, so that could be something good. But there's other things too. There's the cards that affect the board in a big way, you know. So identifying what kind of deck you have is really good too. So you can identify a deck as being a board clearing deck, a board control deck, an amber control deck, you know. So there's a whole bunch of varieties of decks, and I think every deck has the capability of winning, and every deck has a job. And your goal with finding out the amber generation, the number of creatures, and the special things about a deck, you know, counting up how much maybe amber stall it has, how much amber control it has. Like I have amber stall with that Xeno training card, you know. And stall with these, Xeno training is amber control, and stealth mode is kind of board control. So counting all these things up and seeing where your deck has strengths, you know, hitting the magic numbers of creatures, of 15 to 16 creatures is average, more is great. So if you have a lot of creatures and not much amber, your deck might be a reaping deck, right? So you really want to have, with a high creature deck, you want to have a lot of support cards that focus on the board state. So that's kind of what you're looking for when you open a new deck. And, you know, learning the cards is just something that comes with time. Once you see a card and kind of play with it for a while, you'll remember it. But yeah, that's generally what I look for. If there's any more demand for kind of a better edited, you know, even more detailed video, I'll make a longer one, but this is already almost 25 minutes, and I've coughed my way through a quarter of it. So that I'll leave it for there. And I have some Worlds Collide boxes that I'll open up with a healthier voice, I promise. But I want to get this video out there before it was too late and kind of talk about the Vault Tour. But once again, I had a great experience. I met some great people. And yeah, I highly recommend going to a Vault Tour whenever you have a chance. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll be back later with some more Worlds Collide openings. Thanks.